considered by the United States authorities to be of tremendous significance. Again, no mention of extraterrestrial or alien beings. And as you're going to see later, yes, flying saucers did exist. Next slide, please. This is the rest of the Smith memo. It's important that you see the signature and the official stamps and the classifications that were on this thing. It is now declassified. Next slide. At the same time that the government was denying that they were interested in flying saucers, or that flying saucers were real, or that they were investigating or anything, this poster was on the bulletin boards of Air Force bases everywhere. I remember seeing this for many years on bulletin boards where my father worked. And it says, the first thing up there, UFOs, serious business, and outlines the fact that every base must have an officer designated to specifically investigate UFOs and report the evidence. And down here, it tells him what he has to have. And one of the things is a Geiger counter, a magnifying glass. I don't know what he's going to do with that. And have a source for containers in which to store samples. Camera, binoculars, and other things. Next slide, please. This is a news release. At the same time that poster was on the bulletin boards of Air Force bases, the Air Force was issuing news releases saying that we're not investigating flying saucers, there are no such thing, what you're seeing is weather balloons, and we don't even want to know about it. Next slide. And next, that's the last of it. One of the things they did though, that last one, I should have held it there, but that's okay. They said that, you know, it's possible it could be a foreign country experimenting with some weird aircraft flying over our airspace, but of course they couldn't possibly be doing that. Next. At the same time, this poster was also on military bases, and one was the winner of Poster of the Month. Next slide. These are cows. But I wanted to show you what they look like in case some of you haven't been out of the city in a while. Next slide. You know, in some cities that I go to, there's really a reason for doing that. I wanted to show you this. There's something happening with this phenomenon that is absolutely incredible. Everywhere on this slide where you see an M, there has been a classic case of cattle mutilation. I'm going to describe to you what a classic case of cattle mutilation is so that you will know in your mind what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the lips on one side of the face gone. The jaw, the flesh and the muscle on the lower side of one of the jaw, lower jaw, gone, stripped to the bone. The tongue missing, one eye missing, one ear cored out and missing. Usually a 6-inch diameter patch of skin somewhere on the animal has been cut out. If it's a cow, either the entire udder or a portion of the udder is missing. The rectum is cored out in a perfect cone shape. These sexual organs are always missing. If the cow is pregnant, sometimes the fetus of the calf is gone, but the fetal bag is not opened or cut and has not been invaded in any manner. Now that's incredible. But the most significant thing is that all the blood is drained from the animal's body with no vascular collapse, and there's not a drop of blood anywhere. There are no cigarette butts on the ground, there are no tire tracks, there are no shoe prints, there are no footprints, there are no gum wrappers, there is nothing. The government says that coyotes did that. Now, I'm not going to pretend that I know who or what it was, but I do know one thing, it wasn't coyotes. And I also know that our medical personnel, with the best surgical tools at their disposal, cannot make or duplicate the same cuts that are bloodless, that seem to be literally between the cells. There is no blood in any of the wounds. curious about why would these specific parts of the animals be missing. And we came up with some things that are very interesting. Dust collects in the ear. Things that float around in the atmosphere collect in the ear. The lips touch the grass and the earth, so does the lower jaw. The eye is exposed to the atmosphere. The rectum is where most of the heavy impurities, the things that cannot be digested, that are poison to the system, collect, and that's why people get rectum cancer and colon cancer from these things. The sexual organs would show genetic damage. And where does radioactivity show up first in a mammal? In the milk. So then we got very interested in where these mutilations occurred, what time of year, which way was the wind blowing, and what was upwind from these locations. And we found in every single instance there was a nuclear site of some kind, a power plant, a weapons base, a weapons storage installation, weapons manufacturing plant, a testing area, missile stockpile, uranium mines, and tailing piles, waste disposal areas. In every single instance were upwind from these sites. From that, I deduce that whoever is doing it is trying to find out how much radiation has leaked into the atmosphere, the food chain, and the groundwater, and what is it doing to the living mammals in its path. The fact that they leave these carcasses laying out there is an act of terrorism. Literally. I mean, if you want to check for something in these animals, that's fine. But there's no reason why you couldn't take it somewhere else, chop it up, dispose of it, or eat it, or whatever. Why is it being left on the ground? That's an act of terrorism. It's done intentionally to scare people. Why? Maybe to create an alien threat from outer space. Maybe because aliens don't eat beef. Next slide, please. Sometimes these are seen in the sky over the areas where these things occur. Next. Sometimes it's these things with something going up and down from them. Next. Sometimes these things are found, they're being found all over England. One of the incredible things about the crop circles in England is they are literally a vestige of some kind. There's a book called The Father of Lies. In the back of that book, it gives an example of the cipher that the secret societies used in ancient times to communicate with their members so that people who were not initiates would not learn the secrets of the society. The symbols of their cipher match exactly the crop circles found in the ground in England. Now, this was by accident that I ran across this. There's a woman in California who lives in Victorville, who is a wonderful woman, discovered this. She had been looking at pictures of crop circles. She had the book, Father of Lies, and she was reading the book, and it struck her all at once. These are the same. And so she let us know, and we have verified it. They are exactly the same. Secret societies have a lot to do with what's going on, believe me. Next slide. Sometimes these things are seen. Next slide. Always they find this. Next. Then we got to wondering, gosh, all through history there's records of people and animals being found with the blood sucked out of them. Is this the source of the vampire legends? Back through history, we have found that there are accounts of animals and humans who have been mutilated in this classic manner. Next slide, please. This is some of the information a man by the name of Bill English has released. It is some of the exact information that I saw while I was in naval intelligence. He was working as well, he was working in England at a national security agency, listening post really, and he saw the same documents there. Next slide. This is UFO observer's instruction sheet from the Air Technical Intelligence Command, which tells you how to report UFOs at a time when the United States Air Force said they were not reporting UFOs, didn't care about UFOs, they didn't exist. Next. Next. These are all official Air Force forms. Next. 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 Now this is part of Air Force Regulation number 200-2 Alpha, unidentified flying objects, intelligence. Now, this is significant. The Air Force is not supposed to lie to us, but they were telling us, no, UFOs do not exist. We're not interested in UFOs. There is no evidence of UFOs, and anybody that says they say a UFO is crazy. We don't care about UFOs. Yet they have written a U.S. Air Force regulation called 200-2. And this says on the cover sheet, direct communication is authorized between ATIC and other Air Force activities in matters pertaining to UFO investigation. Specifically, the ATIC may call upon the commander of the 1127th Field Activity Group, Fort Belvoir, Virginia, to conduct further field investigations if review of the initial report indicates such a requirement. In this event, the headquarters, 1127th U.S. Air Force Field Activity Group, will prepare the final report by order of the Secretary of the Air Force, Thomas D. White, Chief of Staff. Next page. This tells how to report it, what forms to use, identifying information, weather and winds, comments of preparing officer, classification, time and date of sighting, manner of observation. Next. General information, releasing information. That's funny. Releasing information, it says under here. All information of releases concerning UFOs, regardless of origin or nature, will be released to the public or unofficial persons or organizations by the Office of Information Services Office of the Secretary of the Air Force. This includes replies to correspondence, except congressional inquiries, submitted direct to ATIC and other Air Force activities by private individuals. Exceptions. In response to local inquiries resulting from any UFO reported in the vicinity of an Air Force base, information regarding a sighting may be released to the press or the general public by the commander of the Air Force base concerned only if it has been positively identified as a familiar or known object. Next, please. And it goes on, but we just don't have the time. This is how to report one that moves around in the sky. Next. 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 People always ask me, why don't they just fly around the White House? Well, there's a UFO. This photograph was taken in the early 50s, and that's certainly the White House. Next slide. Those are not butterflies. The truth is, in the early 50s, there was extensive UFO activity in the immediate area of the White House on an almost nightly basis over a long period of time. It is in the headlines of the newspapers. Pilots were scrambled in their aircraft to go and get them out of the airspace around the White House because it's prohibited airspace. And every time they would scramble, get in their planes, take off, the UFOs would disappear. The pilots would go back and land, the UFOs would come back. This kept happening night after night after night until the pilots got so disgusted and so frustrated they wouldn't even get in their planes anymore. Next slide. This is another, this is 200-2 identified flying objects UFO. This is the rest of it. Go ahead, next. All Air Force regulations. Next. Okay, I told you earlier about implants. Let me show you where these implants are being found in human beings. We don't know who's putting them there. The people who are being abducted are telling us that they are alien extraterrestrial beings from outer space. They all tell the same story. They all describe the craft exactly the same. They all describe the beings in the craft the same. They all have describes the same things that have not been made public knowledge, and they don't know each other. And these are people from all around the world. One of the best abductee researchers that I know is here in this room with us, Robin Quayle. One of the implants is inserted up through the nose and is lodged next to the optic nerve in this region. Another implant is inserted beneath the skull cap next to the medulla oblongata in this region. Another implant is found subcutaneously behind usually the right ear and can be seen and felt. I always like to watch everybody feel behind their right ear when I say that. Implants have been found in the wrist, in the calf, and in the lower arm. Next slide. Now, this is very strange because just before these began happening and after we began finding these implants, we began noticing newspaper articles like this. Computer chip implants can help find lost pets, and it goes to outline how this happens. And it tells us that the sheriff's department or the police department in the cities are given electronic equipment to communicate with a satellite that the government has put up. And if you put an implant in your pets, this satellite can find your pet wherever it is when it's lost, and your local law enforcement people, by tuning into this satellite with their electronic equipment, can tell you where your pet is and go get it. Then, next slide, please. Then you hear Dan Rather on the 6 o'clock news say that the pet implant program has worked so well that 97% of all lost pets that have been implanted are being found and returned to their owners, that you should have your children implanted. He said this in 1989. Then you see in the Los Angeles Times, not the National Enquirer, ladies and gentlemen, the Los Angeles Times on 12/12/89, forecast 10 changes for the coming decade. And one of those 10 changes, number 4 in fact, will become necessary in the future with the availability and widespread use of electrical and chemical implants that will allow 24-hour-a-day control of individuals' behavior. Now, are you beginning to get interested in the abductee experience? I hope that you are. You might be next. Next slide. This is just a letter to me from another researcher, next slide, who sent me this. It's in my book. It's the Foreign Broadcast Information Service, Foreign Press Note. Foreign Broadcast Information Service is a division of the Central Intelligence Agency, which monitors foreign broadcasts on radio, television, military, civilian broadcast waves, and gleans information. This entire report, each paragraph is a separate report of flying saucer or UFO reports in the Soviet Union during the period covered by this report, and this report was issued 22 November 1989. You never heard of any. Every paragraph. One of these paragraphs refers to a crashed craft on a hill from which they recovered pieces of technology that we're not capable of manufacturing. Next page, please. All of these. Now you'll see at the top is what they found up here. You look closer so I can read it. Some of the scientists have concluded that the object that crashed into Hill 611 was an extraterrestrial space vehicle constructed by highly intelligent beings. Doctor of Chemical Sciences V. Vysotsky, it's a good thing I'm not Russian, I couldn't talk, stated that without doubt this is evidence of a high technology and it is not anything of a natural or terrestrial origin. He cited the fact that the remnants of fine mesh included bits of thin threads with a diameter of only 17 microns, and that these threads in turn were composed of even thinner strands twisted into braids. Extremely thin gold wires were discovered intertwined in the finest threads, evidence of an intricate technology beyond the present capabilities of terrestrial science, according to this man that I can't pronounce his name. Next slide, please. And it continues. Next. Next. And I was marking some of the locations. There's a mark on here somewhere. Right here. There's one of the locations, one of the reports. Next slide. These are some of the others. I didn't mark every one of them. I marked the important ones in the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. Next slide, please. This is the first known civilian photograph of a UFO. Next slide. This is a letter, the Gerald Light letter. This letter is absolutely astounding. It confirms everything that I've been saying. Nobody knew that this letter even existed until Bob Exler presented it at the 1989 MUFON Symposium in Las Vegas. He presented this on July the 1st. I had already issued my information that this confirms on May the 23rd of the same year. In here, he says, "My dear friend, I've just returned from Muroc." Remember I told you Muroc is Edwards Air Force Base now. "The report is true, devastatingly true. I made the journey in company with Franklin Allen of the Hearst Papers and Edwin Norse of Brookings Institute, Truman's erstwhile financial advisor, and Bishop McIntyre of LA. Confidential names for the present, please. When we were allowed to enter the restricted section after about 6 hours, in which we were checked on every possible item, event, incident, and aspect of our personal and public lives, I had the distinct feeling that the world had come to an end with fantastic realism. For I have never seen so many human beings in a state of complete collapse and confusion as they realized that their own world had indeed ended with such finality as to beggar description." Can you get the sense of what this guy had gone through? "The reality of other plane aeroforms is now and forever removed from the realms of speculation and made a rather painful part of the consciousness of every responsible scientific and political group. During my 2 days visit, I saw 5 separate and distinct types of aircraft being studied and handled by our Air Force officials with the assistance and permission of the Etherians." Notice he calls them Etherians, which means that he attaches some spiritual significance to them. And notice also that he capitalizes Etherians, signifying that he may have viewed them as gods. "I have no words to express my reactions. It has finally happened. It is now a matter of history. President Eisenhower, as you may already know, was spirited over to Muroc one night during his visit to Palm Springs recently. And it is my conviction that he will ignore the terrible conflict between the various authorities and go directly to the public via radio and television if the impasse continues much longer." Well, we know that he didn't do that. And it goes on. We don't have time to read it all. It's in my book in the appendix. Those of you who get the book, you can read it at your leisure. Next. This is the second page. Next. This is Bishop McIntyre. Next. There's old Ike. Remember the slogan, "We like Ike"? Ike started this crap. Next. There he is again. Remember what Ike said to us when he left office? Does anybody remember that? He tried to warn the American people against a group, a powerful group within the defense industrial complex, which might seize unwarranted power and destroy this country. And nobody listened to him. Next. I think he would have said a lot more, but he didn't want to die. Is this one of the little guys he met? Or is this for our entertainment? Next. Is this one of the little guys? Now this is a very well-known photo that's been leaked out to the public. It's been thoroughly debunked by everybody in the world, but it's never been proven false. Never been proven to be a fraud. Nobody knows where it came from. Now I hope you all know what debunked means. Let me show you what debunked means. What's your name, ma'am? No, it's not. What's your name? No, it's not. What's your name? No, it's not. That's what debunked means. Next slide. One of the things that I saw and I talked about earlier was that there was an elite group of scientists called the Jason Group, administered by a corporation which at that time was not the MITRE Corporation, but is the MITRE Corporation now. I talked about that all over the country. People said, you're crazy. Well, I found reference to them in the Pentagon papers that were leaked by Daniel Ellsberg. And in the Pentagon papers, it said that the Jason Group had invented and come up with the electronic barrier that was placed across the DMZ of Vietnam to detect and prevent the North Vietnamese regulars from coming across the border. I was there on the DMZ. It didn't work. So they're not as smart as they think they are. But they do exist. Some people submitted Freedom of Information Act requests and actually got the truth out of the Pentagon. The first official acknowledgement that they exist. We submitted one and got it, but what I'm going to show you is not what I got, because people always doubt what I get, so I'm going to show you what somebody else got. Richard Whitmire of the Gannett News Service published this in the Olympian in Washington, and this is what he found. Next slide. He found that these guys are incredible. They have the highest security clearances in the nation. There are several Nobel Prize winners in the group. They hold the protocol rank of Rear Admiral, which is 2 stars whenever they visit any military installation, ship, airplane, Air Force base, or government facility. They are paid $500 a day consulting fee, and they are literally some of the best brains in this country. Next slide. Next. And these are some of the lists. These are some of them. There is only one woman among them. Her name is Claire Max. Let me see if I can find her. I think she's on the next slide. There she is, Claire E. Max, Institute of Geophysics and Planetary Physics, Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory. What do they need with a planetary physicist in a government consulting group? Next. Next. I always try to point out what's happening with women because I'm very sensitive to women's needs nowadays. I think, really, truthfully, if the world were run by women, we wouldn't be in this situation. Next. This is Bob Exler's idea of what the cover-up structure looks like. He believes wholeheartedly that to have a cover-up of this kind, involving this kind of technology, you would have to have full support from what we call corporate America. Now, this would be very easy in this country because who is corporate America? It's literally the Council on Foreign Relations. And I'm going to show you later that not only is this possible, it's probably absolutely right on. Next. Next, we've already looked at this. This is a piece of film that was sent to Leonard Stringfield, who is another researcher, who, the person who sent this film said that this was an alien extraterrestrial body recovered from a craft that had been burnt. I've looked at this at every angle that I possibly can think of, and I can't tell what in the world it is, except that you can sort of get a sense that it's probably biological something. Next. This was also sent to Leonard Stringfield, and the same thing was purported to be said. They said that this was the burned body of a crashed extraterrestrial being from a crashed spaceship. And this one is a fraud. Because right here, under the body, is a pair of Air Force flight glasses. I've seen enough of those in my life to know exactly what they are. Next. This is an official U.S. The newsreels captured it. We went down to watch Roy Rogers on Saturday morning, and they showed us this thing hopping around the flight line in front of a bunch of reporters in bleachers, and it never went anywhere. It just sort of hopped around, and the pilot had this incredible, terrified look on his face. Next slide. This is a photograph taken at a junkyard at a, I believe it was White Sands test range. Nobody knows what it is. Looks like a mad welder went wild. Next. This is a photograph. It's supposed to be able to learn how well parachutes of different designs work with this thing. Is that true? I don't know. Next. This is another one. We couldn't figure out what this is used for. We compared the shape and the size of this to the known nose cowlings of large aircraft, and we haven't been able to find anything that it fits. But there's a lot of experimental aircraft that you never get to see, so that doesn't mean anything really. Next. These are photographs of 3 UFOs, or actually 4. One's almost out of the photograph up there, over a power plant. They seem to really like power plants. They're seen a lot, especially around nuclear power plants. If my theory about the cattle mutilations is correct, that might explain it. Next slide. February 27th, 1951. Isn't Lassie beautiful? Next slide. This advertisement was in this magazine. Flying mobile camper of the future may be electric powered, plugging into any electric outlet for recharging. Now this is during the period of time when people like Herman Oberth, the world-renowned rocket scientist who was the teacher to Dr. von Braun, was saying that we couldn't take credit for all the technology that we've developed in the last decade. And when the reporter asked Dr. Oberth, what do you mean? What other nations helped us? He said, it wasn't another nation, son. It was those little guys from out there. And the security people grabbed him and hustled him right out of the press conference. That was at his retirement. It was also the same period of time when William P. Lear, John Lear's father, said on a television talk show, when asked what he could see for the future, he said, you will be able to get into a phone booth in Los Angeles and step out in New York City. And he wasn't joking, and the audience laughed at this man. This was one of the bigwigs in the defense industrial complex who knew exactly what was being researched in our laboratories at that time. Next slide. And also in this magazine, this scientist, Richard Wilson, exposes flying saucers. He says what they've been saying for day one, they're weather balloons. Next slide. Albert Einstein. If, in fact, extraterrestrials were real and we had recovered that technology, I'm sure that Albert Einstein would have known about it, would have been in on it in one way or another. Next slide. And he may have known about things like this, the proceedings of the Lunar and Planetary Exploration Colloquium. May 13th, 1958. Look at that date because it's very significant when you look at what's in this book, and I'm going to show you a few pages. I've got this book at home. I guard it carefully because it's the only copy that's ever been able to be located, and I've got it. Introduction to the Initiating Group, Scientific Aspects of the Lunar Surface. How did they find that out? The physical characteristics of the lunar surface. The geological aspects of the interior of the moon. Evolution and nature of the lunar atmosphere. Didn't someone tell us that there was no lunar atmosphere? Isn't that correct? Or was I not paying attention that day? Next slide. In this paragraph, they say the introduction to the initiating group is that this is a lunar-based planning group. And then it's going to be attended by the RAND Corporation, by people from UCLA, by North American Aviation. Next slide, please. You can see that this colloquium took place between May 13th, 1958 and April 25th, 1959. Next slide. Next. Here's another contents of a separate section of the same document. The chemistry of the moon, chemical resources on the moon, power for a lunar colony, where to land on the moon, observations on Mars and Venus. It doesn't say observations of Mars and Venus. Gamma ray spectroscopy of the moon's surface, program of lunar and planetary experiments, and the crater Linnae, which is very important, ladies and gentlemen, because the crater Linnae has completely disappeared from the surface of the moon. You cannot find it. It's as if bulldozers have covered it up. Next slide. But in 1958, in this document, there may have been someone on the moon at that time. Next slide. Are orbiting the moon who took these photos of the crater Linnae. What's so interesting in the crater Linnae? Why did they have that in their colloquium? Well, there's a couple of things. One is this right here. Look at the crater. See the crater? See where the shadow is? And see where the sun is? There's another crater. See where the shadow is and where the sun is? That means this is not a crater. This is something sticking straight up from the surface or coming out of the surface of the moon. The caption in the photograph said that this is gas escaping from the interior of the moon. But there's even something even more interesting, and that is in this crater there is a dome. And in this crater there's also a dome. These are both the same photograph taken with different filters. Next slide. Now supposedly we had nothing up there in 1958 and 59 orbiting the moon, and there was nothing on Earth that could take a photograph like that from the Earth. This is the Tonopah area of Nevada. Tonopah Test Range is out in this area. Next. Down here you can see Nellis Air Force Base. See again up here, Tonopah Test Range. Down in here is Mercury. Over here is Groom Lake. Next slide. This is the Tonopah Test Range with some revelations on it. Stealth fighter flight path, turn off to TTR, rocket on stand, radar road, large radar facilities. Unmarked runway used by stealth fighters is here. We could go on and on, but we don't have the time. Next. This area is also the test range. Nellis Air. Over here it says Force Base. Gold Flat. You see over here is Tonopah. Right up here it says Saucer Mesa. See that? Saucer Mesa. I don't know if that means anything, but I think that's a hell of a coincidence in an area where they're testing flying saucers, that you've got a name on a map called Saucer Mesa. Next. This is a letter from a man who worked this is in my book, so I'm just going to brush over it lightly, who worked in Area 51 and saw the saucer fly. Next. That's just a lens cap for my camera. We cover up names to protect the identity of people so that they don't get hurt. But in here, he talks about seeing crates labeled Project Red Light. Project Red Light is the name of the project that I saw that flew crashed alien discs in the technology that we had for flying saucers. He also talks about the fact that when a certain siren would go off, they were supposed to run into a building and they couldn't look out the windows. Or if they were caught outside, they all wore a little pouch on their belt that contained a black hood. They were to take the black hood out of the pouch, put it over their head, and lie down on their stomach on the ground and not move. Next. And he goes through, he talks about, he says he saw the pilots. They were human and they were just slightly larger than he was. Next. And next. This is a photograph of one of the craft flying above Area 51 in Nevada. Next. This is a photograph of some craft. I forgot where this was taken. It was not in Nevada, but this symbol, some people say that this symbol belongs to a group of aliens called the UMO group. Now, I did a lot of research to find out if there's anything in this earth named UMO. I found an UMO corporation in London, England, that was a KGB front company. Just like the CIA has front companies. One of them is Gray Advertising in New York City. Belongs to the Central Intelligence Agency. They are the ones who pay the expense checks for UFO Cover-Up Live. Next. This is a saucer developed and flown by the French. It is real. It flies. It's not a joke. Next. It's another view of the same saucer. You can see the hatch down here. This is significant. That is a watertight, airtight hatch.
What kind of technology is that based on?
Boy, you got me. It says here, it says 3 135 horsepower engines would supply the power. Doesn't say that it did, and it doesn't say what kind of engines. Next. Now, if you remember, not too long ago, Jackie Gleason's wife, after he died, released an unpublished manuscript, and in it she says that Jackie Gleason told her that he was asked to accompany President Nixon to Homestead Air Force Base, where President Nixon showed him dead alien bodies in a morgue. Jackie Gleason was very much interested in UFOs and all of that kind of stuff, and he was a friend of President Nixon. Nobody knows if the story is true, but I don't think his wife has any reason to lie to us. Why would she want to discredit her dead husband with something ridiculous that wasn't true? Next. And that was the cover of this magazine, June 14th, 1955. Next. In which this story appeared. This was information leaked by a general. And he gave them a scoop. These are actual drawings of a United States Air Force flying saucer. Tells how it worked. Shows the air base of the future. And what is it? I'll be damned if it isn't an underground base. Where they can go in and out this way, out cliffs like they do under the Archuleta Mesa near Dulce, New Mexico, or up out the top. What a coincidence. Next. Next. As it evolved into this. Here we are again at the Nevada test range. Next slide. Now, this is Groom Dry Lake right here. Notice it says danger. Right up here is where the 29.5-mile marker is. Right up here somewhere is the little alien. Down here is Las Vegas. This highway goes up out of Las Vegas through Alamo to Ash Springs. Then you take this highway down here to the 29.5-mile marker, and you look directly at Groom Lake on any given night from dusk till dawn, and you will see them fly. You can take photographs of them. You could videotape them. Thousands of people have done it. They have called into radio shows and said what they saw. When Billy Goodman was on KVEG in Las Vegas, every night, dozens of people would call in and report what they saw out there. Next slide. That's Groom Lake again, showing the tunnels that go to Los Alamos and up to Tonopah. Next. These are the facilities at Groom Lake. The United States Air Force and the government say that there is nothing there. It is a barren desert wasteland with a dry lake bed. There is nothing there. This is where they developed the U-2. Next. It's another view of the same thing. Next. Here's another view. Same. Another view. Another view. Another view. I guess by now you all know there's something there. The runway is over 30,000 feet long. That's 6 miles. It's really closer to 7 miles from the people that I've talked to. This is a satellite, an SR-71 photograph. Next, this is, no, the other one was a satellite photograph. This is an SR-71 photograph, I'm sorry. Next slide. And this is what we've been able to identify as being there. The runway was built in 4 phases. They have a TACAN, which is a tactical navigation tower, navigational aids, access road, refueling ramp, tank farm. Tank farm is fuel tanks. Pipeline, road, housing, MiG haven. They have one of every kind of MiG that was ever built here. Power lines, water supply. This is a National Security Agency, CIA satellite intercepting dish antenna. Next. This is one of the underground tunnels. We found a publication, we'll look for something called Project RAND, which turned out to be a deep underground symposium hosted by the RAND Corporation and attended by some of the biggest defense contractors in the country. And in it were these photographs. Next. The date of this symposium in this publication was 1959. Next. Next. Look at that drill bit, ladies and gentlemen. In this, they said they had the technology to drill a tunnel 45 feet in diameter at the rate of 5 feet per hour. No one knew this technology existed at that time. We thought the Hughes drill bit that drilled for oil was the greatest thing since butter. Next. Look at that. Next. Now you know why Howard Hughes knew almost everything. These were developed by the Hughes Tool Company. Next. 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 What kind of engine turned these things? In the symposium report, it says, just as airplanes, ships, and automobiles have given man mastery of the surface of the earth, tunnel boring machines and shaft sinkers will give him access to the subterranean world. What in the hell are they talking about? And construction of underground facilities. I also saw in the documents that there were underground bases all over this country, specifically in the Four Corners area of Utah, Colorado, Arizona, and New Mexico. Next. Next slide tray. You got to go back to the beginning. Okay, next slide tray. Everybody, stand up, take a stretch so you don't get kinks in your muscles. And we're just going to keep going right on through, and then we'll take a break in about 30 minutes. Wrong, and you need to help us find out what truth is. I don't pretend to know all the truth. I think I have some of the answers. I think I have reached some pretty good conclusions, but again, those are my conclusions, not yours. If in your research or your activities you can prove something that I have said or done or shown you here wrong, I want to know about that so that I can verify your research and your conclusions and change it. Just go ahead and put the first slide in. Is that the first one? That's backwards.
Backwards?
I think so. Is it first?
Forward button.
Okay, go back to 0. Go back to 1. Is that 1? Okay, go to 1.
That's the last one.
Okay.
Should be number 2.
Okay, when we began to research this underground stuff and these tunnels, we found newspaper articles that stated, this is the Los Angeles Times, Wednesday, June 28, 1989, the secret of Moscow's underworld. Moscow also has tunnels under it, as does much of the Soviet Union. And next slide. Next. This is the Dulce, New Mexico area. Let me get my little wizard zip gun here. This is the small town of Dulce, New Mexico. Everybody is making a big mistake calling this the Dulce base, the Dulce underground base, the Dulce papers, the Dulce this, the Dulce that. It causes confusion. I don't know how many people have gone to Dulce, New Mexico, walked all day around that little town, and have come back and said to me, there's nothing in Dulce, New Mexico. And they're absolutely right. There never was. Except some very nice people who are terrified. North of Dulce, however, there is an area called the Archuleta Mesa, up here. Under this mesa is an underground installation of immense proportions. Up Seguro Canyon here, there's an area right in here where there are 400-foot cliffs, out of which people who have gone on expeditions that knew exactly where the base was, because they came and talked to those of us who know and found out where to go, have gone up to these peaks across Seguro Canyon from Archuleta Mesa and observed the mesa and these cliffs and the surrounding area. They have seen UFOs fly over this mesa. They have seen them stop over the mesa and showers of sparks come down. Nobody knows what it means. They have seen craft fly in and out of this 400-foot cliff area here. They have seen strange marks on the ground from the air. They have reported during the night hearing what sounds like CB radios or police radios coming from in this area. And I'm sure you've all heard what that sounds like. But there's nothing up there. There's not supposed to be anything up there. The old-timers who live in the area will tell you that, and that's on the Colorado side up here, the old-timers who live up here on the Colorado side, will tell you that back in the 50s, there was a logging road built up in there, and logging trucks went back and forth every day, but they never brought out any logs. Next slide. This is the Colorado side of Archuleta Mesa. Here's the logging road that they built. You can see it. Went all the way up here and then up into the mesa. It's not being used now. This is all under the Jicarilla Apache Indian Reservation, and Archuleta Mesa is considered to be their holy land, their holy ground. It's an excellent security proposition for them. They didn't have to build fences or anything. The Indians keep people away. The Indians see the strange lights and the craft flying back and forth, and they attributed this to their religious beliefs that they have seen all through their history, that it's in their writings, in their tales, in their stories. You can get some of the most incredible stories about UFOs from American Indians when they will talk to you. Next slide, please. These are some more of the photographs from the RAND symposium. Next. Oh, let me see. This is a page from an Air Force textbook. Space, let me see. I forgot the name of it. I think it's Physics and Space Technology, I believe. But anyway, in this textbook, it says the most commonly described alien is about 3 1/2 feet tall, has a round head or helmet, arms reaching to or below his knees, and is wearing a silvery spacesuit or coveralls. Other aliens appear to be essentially the same as Earthmen, while still others have particularly wide wraparound eyes and mouths with very thin lips, and there is a rare group reported as about 4 feet tall, weight of around 35 pounds, and covered with thick hair or fur, and in parentheses they have clothing with a question mark. Members of this last group are described as being extremely strong. Human fear and hostility, it says, besides the foregoing reasons, contacting humans is downright dangerous. Might be one reason they want to keep themselves secret if they're really here. Now, this is a textbook. This is a page out of a U.S. Air Force Academy textbook. Next page. This is another page out of the same textbook. It says, this leaves us with the unpleasant possibility of alien visitors to our planet, or at least of alien-controlled UFOs. When this textbook got into the hands of researchers, they excised the entire chapter from the textbook. Next. See if the name of it's on here. Nope. Okay, next. This is Janet 146D. You want to know why people don't report these things? Want to know why more airline pilots don't speak up? Why more captains of ships don't speak up? It's because of Janet 146, Joint United States-Canadian Communications Instructions for Reporting, and notice it says vital intelligence sightings. Now, in this regulation, it says, if you make this report, you can be thrown in jail for talking about any of the information in the report. You can be fined. You can lose your license. But if you don't make the report, it's okay to talk about it. Next. And this just goes through telling you what's in here. Next. 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 Wait a minute, go back to the last. Oh, here we go. Stay on that. Unidentified flying objects. Just want to make sure that you know that this specifically stated in this report that they are to be reported. Next. Okay, let's go through this. Go ahead. And go ahead. We just don't have time to cover every paragraph and all of the pertinent information. Go ahead. Keep going. Keep going. You can see how extensive this is. Keep going. Keep going. This is some footage that I put in here because someplace I get to where I'm going, and they have assured me they will have a video projector, and they don't. So you'll see a little bit on Kennedy assassination here. I use these photographs because this man was extremely human and photogenic and charismatic. So much so that if you hated his politics, you still couldn't help like John Kennedy. Most of the pictures you're going to see came out of this magazine, next, this magazine, next, and this book, next. Go ahead. Can you imagine pictures like this of Richard Nixon? Lyndon Johnson? George Bush? Gerald Ford? Oops. I'm not going to ask you this because some people are probably not going to be able to raise their hand, but I just wonder how many men in here have kissed your father lately. Next. This is a photograph of Kennedy after he'd been shot in the throat. Jacqueline is looking at him in horror. He's clutching his throat. Next. This is William Greer beginning to turn around. You can see his hand here, his arm. You can see the end of the gun barrel right there. Next. Now you can see him. Here's his hand, his arm. The gun is right behind this flash of reflection here. You can see him looking directly back at the president. Next slide. Next. Now, you can see the top of Kellerman's head right here. People argue that that's a reflection off the top of Kellerman's head. It is not. You can also see Kellerman's hand is on the wheel. Kellerman, that's his arm and hand, is actually driving the car at that point. Kellerman is a Secret Service agent who was the passenger in the front seat. Pardon? No. No. John Connolly was sitting directly behind Agent Kellerman. And his wife was sitting directly behind Greer. That's John Connolly's wife, and that's John Connolly. Next. This is Kennedy's grave. Next. Everybody wonders why Jacqueline Kennedy never said anything. That's the reason right there. Where were her children? They were being guarded by the Secret Service, who just shot her husband. It was the Secret Service. Who the hell was she going to tell? And what was she going to tell them? To this day, her children are in the guard of the Secret Service, and so is she. Next. It was not Lee Harvey Oswald, ladies and gentlemen, because that's him right there, standing in the doorway of the Dallas Book Depository as the motorcade drove by. The Central Intelligence Agency has agents in the civilian community writing books and making statements to keep you confused. They will tell you that's not Lee Harvey Oswald, it's somebody who looks like him.
What was Jack Ruby's part in?
I don't know, but he certainly had a part. Next. There he is again. Lee Harvey Oswald. We have done body proportion measurement comparison. We have studied the clothing. We have studied the jawline, the features of the face. Next. And it is Lee Harvey Oswald. Next. And that's us if we don't do something quick. Next. Now, everybody wants to know, why do we have to have a one-world government? Why is it that they won't let us have these things that we know will cure disease? Why are they so hard on homeopathic medicine? Why this, why that, why this, why that? It's simple, folks. Once you really get into it, there is no doubt about it, there is a serious population problem. At the end of World War II, or actually during the war, they did a study to try to determine the effect of the returning soldiers from the war upon the economy. What the people who made the study projected was that there was going to be a whole bunch of babies born. They did a study again in 1957, which stated that the exponential increase of the population would ensure that the population would double between 1957 and 1990, and it did. They said that if something wasn't done, the increase in the use of insecticides, toxic chemical waste, effluent sewage, the pollution of the air, the use of fossil fuels, the use of timber, the increased need for raw materials was going to put us in a crisis. because they said that if something wasn't done to stop the growth of the population would double again 28 years from 1990. And it will. And then we will need twice as many trees, twice as many homes, twice as many cars, twice as much oil, twice as much food, twice as much everything. We will be putting twice as much sewage into the earth, twice as much pollution into the atmosphere, twice as much toxic waste material. And the study said if we don't stop this, if something isn't done, the human race will cause itself to become extinct shortly by or after the year 2000. Some people still didn't believe it. So the Club of Rome was formed secretly by Dr. Aurelio Pachetti in Rome, Italy. He got together a group of elite men and scientists, and they did another study and came up with exactly the same answers. They then commissioned a group of people in the United States at MIT. They put together a team to establish a computer model to determine what can be done to stop this, what can be done to ensure that it doesn't happen again, what can be done to ensure that the human race survives. And the answer is some of the things that I'm going to show you. All of this is in my book. It's thoroughly documented. It's going to really upset some of you, but it's true. The first indication publicly was this book written by Dr. Paul R. Ehrlich. Now, you all wonder why is Dr. Paul Ehrlich writing these books? That's because his wife, ladies and gentlemen, is a member of the Club of Rome. Next slide. This was copyrighted first in 1968. It was the first indication of the results of the secret studies. This was published by Paul Ehrlich. Next. It says here, probably accurate to say that if all the food produced in the world today were in some sense equally distributed, that everyone would have an adequate diet. Does that mean that those who claim that there is no population problem, only a problem of distribution, are correct? Absolutely not. Population pressures are a product of animals as they exist, not as they might be. If lions ate grass instead of antelopes, the plains of Africa could support many more of them before the plains would be overpopulated. Similarly, the carrying capacity of Earth for saints is considerably higher than the carrying capacity for Homo sapiens. In theory, the problem of human overpopulation could be solved by a reduction in population size or by a change towards more saintly behavior. The current situation of global overpopulation is so serious, and the built-in potential for further population increase is so great, that the only sensible strategy for humanity today is to end population growth and start a population decline as rapidly as is humanly possible, simultaneously striving to achieve a more equitable distribution of the food and other goods of this planet. Limiting births and increasing social justice are not alternative strategies to preserving society. They are, ladies and gentlemen, necessary complements. Next slide. Now, here is the key. In this book, Paul Ehrlich told us that they had already decided on the solution because they had tried zero population growth and we didn't buy it. We didn't buy it. It worked in some small areas, but it didn't work in many, and it certainly didn't work worldwide. This paragraph tells you everything that you ever need to know about what is happening today and will answer a lot of your questions. Basically, then, there are only two kinds of solutions to the population problem. One is a birth rate solution, in which we find ways to lower the birth rate. Didn't work. Didn't work. The other is a death rate solution, in which ways to raise the death rate, war. You asked me about the Middle East. You asked me about what happened to Iran. You asked me about El Salvador. You asked me about Nicaragua. You asked me what's going to happen in the future. This paragraph tells you what's going to happen. famine, pestilence find us. They have just shut off the water to all the farmers in the San Joaquin Valley. They produce 50% of all the vegetables that are consumed in this country. Do you believe that's an accident after reading this? Large corporations and banks have been forcing the small farmer out of existence and buying up land which sits fallow. Do you think that's an accident? We have sold all of our grain to the Soviet Union. Do you think that's an accident? There's not 20 days supply of grain in this country if we needed it in an emergency. Now listen to this. The problem could have been avoided by population control, in which mankind consciously adjusted the birth rate so that a death rate solution did not have to occur. He's telling us, ladies and gentlemen, that they have already decided upon it and that it is in effect. Next. The next warning was the limits to growth. This was published by the Club of Rome. Next. The conclusions are, and this is only what they revealed to the public, what they told to the power elite of the world is an entirely different story and is much more radical. If the present growth trends in world population, industrialization, pollution, food production, and resource depletion continue unchanged, the limit to growth on this planet will be reached sometime within the next 100 years. The most probable result will be a rather sudden and uncontrollable decline in both population and industrial capacity. And what they don't say here that they said in the secret report is that the masses of people in the world will result to the overthrow of their government and anarchy will reign as they try to feed themselves and their families and find jobs. It is possible to alter these growth trends and to establish a condition of ecological and economic stability that is sustainable far into the future. The state of global equilibrium could be designed so that the basic material needs of each person on Earth are satisfied and each person has an equal opportunity to realize his individual human potential. Who would suffer the most under such a plan? Not the rich, ladies and gentlemen. They are in control. It's going to be us. Americans consume most of the raw materials in the world. 50% of the energy supply is consumed in this country. We pollute the earth more than any other nation. It is us who are going to have to go back and live like our ancestors did, and they're going to make us if we don't learn how to do it on our own. I'd rather be a volunteer than a slave. I don't know about you. If the world's people decide to strive for the second outcome rather than the first, the sooner they begin working to attain it, the greater will be their chances of success. And down in the last paragraph, something really important. These conclusions are so far-reaching and raise so many questions for further study that we are quite frankly overwhelmed by the enormity of the job that must be done. We hope that this book will serve to interest other people in many fields of study and in many countries of the world to raise the space and time horizons of their concerns and to join us in an understanding and preparing for a period, and listen to this because they're not kidding, it's coming very soon, for a period of great transition, the transition from global equilibrium. Henry Kissinger said when asked what he foresaw for the coming decade, he said, everything will be different. There will be a new world order. Many will suffer. For those who survive, the world will be better. And the last thing he said, we will have the world we have always wanted. Now, if you know anything about Henry Kissinger, he never wastes words, and he knows what's going on. Next. This is the regionalized and adaptive model of the global world system from the computer model at MIT, designed for the Strategy for Survival project of the Club of Rome. Patriots in this country have been running around calling the Club of Rome a subversive organization. They've been trying to ensure our survival. They're a study group, a think tank. That's all they are. They don't make the decisions. Next. We don't have time to go through all of this, but it's in my book. That chapter is going to be the most interesting chapter that you're going to read in my book. And everything that I say in there and here is thoroughly documented. Next. And next. And next. These are the New World regions. There is already a new constitution has been made for the United States of America. It's called the New States Constitution. It was paid for by your tax dollars over a 10-year period. It was developed by the Center for Democratic Studies in Santa Barbara, California, and it cost $25 million. The entire Constitution is also in my book. Next. You could see by there Region 1 was the combination of the United States and Canada, and that's the real reason for the lowering of the trade restrictions between the United States and Canada. We are fixing to be merged. Next. And next. There are 10 regions in the New World Order, and you are looking at them now. Next. Next. What's one of the answers? Alternative 3. I also saw documentation, and I've already shown you documentation on slides, that there may have been somebody in the moon in 1958, and I can tell you right now, there is a base on the moon. We are attempting to colonize space because if their attempts to control our greed and our wastefulness and our destruction of this earth do not work, the only hope for the survival of the human race is colonization of other planets. Next. This is verification. I can't tell you who wrote this letter, but it is a letter that was delivered into our hands from, well, I can't tell you that. But this confirms that as far back as 1962, working for the Jet Propulsion Labs in Pasadena, she was working on photography taken of the moon and Mars from objects that went there. I can tell you that the first landing on Mars of a probe occurred on May the 22nd, 1962, sent back photographs and verified the existence of an atmosphere that could support life. This woman was married to a man. She says in this letter, his function was to design domed modular living facilities, next slide please, for colonies of Earth scientists to be stationed on the moon and then Mars. It was called Project Adam and Eve. We didn't get this letter, ladies and gentlemen, until August of 1989. I had already revealed the presence of a colony on the moon and Mars on July the 2nd, 1989. Okay, next. 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 Report from Iron Mountain on the possibility and desirability of peace. Next. This is really important. Though not yet expressly put forth as the development of a long-range sequence of space research projects with largely unattainable goals, this kind of program offers several advantages lacking in the social welfare model. First, it is unlikely to phase itself out regardless of the predictable surprises science has in store for us. The universe is too big. In the event some individual project unexpectedly succeeds, there would be no dearth of substitute problems. For example, if colonization of the moon proceeds on schedule, it could then become necessary to establish a beachhead on Mars or Jupiter and so on. Next. This is a book called Exploring Space with a Camera, published by the National Aeronautics and Space Administration. Next. In which you see tracks on the surface of the moon. Now I want you to notice where these tracks go. They start way up here. They go down into this valley, up over this hill, down in this valley, up over this hill, down in this crater, up over this hill, and down here. And NASA says it's rocks rolling downhill. Next. Next. Here's another one. Look at this. It goes way down in this crater, up here, over here, down in this little crater, up, down again, and stops right there and makes a long shadow. Next. Here's another one.
So whatever was making those tracks was still there.
Yes. Next. Look here. Look at those tracks. Look at that object and look how big the shadow is. Here's another small set of tracks here. Goes out into the washout and the light. And here's another one. It comes up out of the crater and down here. And there's the object casting a shadow. Rocks rolling downhill. Next. These are official NASA photographs taken right out of a NASA publication. I didn't fake them. You can go get the same book and look at them yourself. They told us there's no water on the moon. I guess that doesn't call for any comment, does it? Next. This is another book that we had to get because they had pulled it off the shelves when they found out what was in it, and another one also. Also printed by NASA. Next. There's the title page. Next. And this is the other one, Atlas and Gazetteer of the Near Side of the Moon. We have located one in the library of the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, which the title is The Lunar Base, and we are trying to get someone in there to photograph it now. Next. 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 Right here, you can see a machine inside the crater throwing dirt out of the crater, and right there you can see a saucer sitting on the rim. Over here you can see a crater that's already been artificially mined and is just left vacant. Next. That's another view of it. You can no longer see the disk that was sitting on the rim. It's gone. Next. Pardon? I don't remember. We've already passed that page. Does everybody want to go back to it? Got to be quick. Go ahead. Next. Down in this crater, you see all kinds of artificial objects. We have no idea what they are. They are not natural. It's really strange. You can see here a building with a ramp coming this way and then up to the top, and then a flattened off top here and square corners all around it. You never find anything like that in nature anywhere. There are other objects, I won't go into them. That is the most obvious. It has square corners all the way around. Next. Here you can see the antenna from the lunar orbiter here. Look at these weird things in this crater over here. These are the ones we just looked at, and that's where the mining is going on, or what appears to be mining up there. And this is the artificial crater that we looked at. All of the other photographs that you saw were macro photography taken